Hello, welcome to class 11 on middle and negative constructions in Spanish and English. Overview of this class. I will start by activating knowledge on valency patterns in English. Then I'll move on to speak about the subclassification of intransitive verbs into ergative and inergative verbs. Then I'll speak about intransitive verbs in Spanish, intransitivos, inergativos, inacusativos. Then I'll give a brief overview on middle voice as background knowledge to understand the main features of middle and ergative constructions in English and Spanish. And we'll round off with a final practice. The main verb in a clause determines the other elements that are required in that clause. The pattern of the clause elements is called the valency pattern for the verb. In English, we can speak about 5 basic patterns. Linking verbs, that is to say the linking verb followed by a complement. Transitive verbs, which in turn we can speak about monotransitive verbs, ditransitive verbs, and complex transitive verbs when the direct object is followed by a complement, and intransitive verbs, both of complete and of incomplete predication, depending on whether a complement is needed or not. But for the topic of today's class, we are going to concentrate on the difference between ergative and inergative verbs, which are subclassifications of intransitive verbs. Depending on the thematic role of their syntactic subject, intransitive verbs can be subclassified into ergative and inergative verbs. Inergative verbs differ from ergative verbs in that their subject has the thematic role of agent. For example, verbs like complain, walk, smile, among many others. So in the sentence, the customer complained about the poor service. The customer is the syntactic subject and the agent at the same time. The same goes for I in I walk every day, or they in they smiled at each other. Ergative verbs. The subject of an ergative verb, in contrast, has the thematic role of theme or patient argument. For instance, in the ice melted in the sun, melt is an ergative verb. Why? Because the subject, the syntactic subject, the ice, undergoes a change of state. Thus, its thematic role cannot be that of an agent, because the ice is not doing anything by itself, but it's experiencing or undergoing an event. There is a more basic construction to this sentence, to the sentence the ice melted in the sun. And this is the sun melted the ice, in which melt is a transitive verb and where the thematic roles are realized canonically. That is to say, the sun, the syntactic subject, is the agent, melted the ice, the noun phrase, the ice, the object is the patient. Why do we speak about the thematic roles being realized canonically? Because this is what we expect. In general, what is expected is that the agent subject, the thematic role of agent in subject position is the most frequent and expected position. Derived constructions. There are many transitive verbs in English that can be used as intransitive verbs and which are referred to as derived constructions. Just like the example we have just analyzed, the ice melted in the sun derives from the sun melted the ice. Let's have a look at more examples. For example, bookshops are selling his novel well. and his novel is selling well. His novel is selling well is a derived construction. We can see that the verb sell in this case is used intransitively. It is followed by an adverbial, the adverbial well. In its basic use, sell is a transitive verb, and the novel, his novel, the patient, is in object position. Let's have a look at more examples. I dried my nails with spray. That's a basic construction. I is the agent. But my nails dried fast. My nails, the syntactic subject, performs the thematic role of patient or theme. Therefore, this is a derived construction. The verb dry is used intransitively. The clerk sounded the alarm. This is a basic construction, and the derived construction would be the alarm sounded at midnight. Okay, what about Spanish? In Spanish, we can also speak about two types of intransitive verbs. Intransitivos propiamente dichos, que se llaman inergativos, inergative, again, with a syntactic subject agent. Su padre jamás sonreía, el verbo sonreír, el verbo caminar, el verbo quejarse, como vimos recién en inglés. They are also intransitive verbs inergativos en español. Su padre jamás sonreía. And then we also have the other subclasses, intransitivos inacusativos, que también se pueden llamar ergativos, igual que en inglés. With a syntactic subject with the role of patient or theme. These verbs, los intransitivos inacusativos or ergativos, can be either pronominales or no pronominales. The latter, los no pronominales, do not have transitive counterparts. For example, verbs that denote change of state or location. El verbo hervir. Uno puede decir herví la verdura, tiene un uso transitivo, pero puedo decir la verdura ya está hirviendo, y ahí verdura, el sujeto sintáctico, tiene la función del papel temático de paciente. O sea que hervir puede ser usado como transitivo o como intransitivo, pero no tiene una forma pronominal. Ahora, si yo digo, se hierve, no sé, el arroz en agua, ahí no es un verbo pronominal, sino que sería una voz pasiva con C. Lo mismo pasa con morir y caer, son verbos intransitivos, hay muchos más, y ya hemos estudiado que el agregado de C los convertiría en casos de C diacrítico. Morir, morirse, es una cuestión de estilo. Morir es más formal que morirse, y lo mismo pasa con caer y caerse. And then we have verbs of existence or appearance, llegar, aparecer, existir. Of course, they neither have transitive counterparts nor pronominal forms. González Romero, en su artículo Construcciones medias en inglés y en español, explains that in Spanish, the equivalent structures to the ergative constructions in English employ or usually employ pronominal verbs whose particles se turn transitive verbs into intransitive verbs. This is what we have studied, what we have already studied or seen as casos de se intransitivizador. El sol derritió el hielo. El hielo se derritió. Se derritió con el sol o se derritió al sol. Hay un error ahí. Con el sol o al sol. En ese caso, derretirse es un verbo intransitivo. El incremento pronominal lo ha intransitivizado. Also, me sequé las uñas con spray. Sequé, verbo transitivo. Las uñas, objeto directo paciente. Las uñas, sujeto sintáctico paciente, se secaron rápido. Secarse. Un verbo pronominal que gracias al incremento del C se convirtió en intransitivo. A la vez estos son verbos ergativos, that denote change of state. Okay. After having made this brief introduction and reminded you of these different subclassifications, mainly of intransitive verbs, we are going to go into middle and ergative constructions. Pay attention to the fact that now we are going to be dealing with constructions, not with verbs. I'm not speaking about middle or voice. I'm not speaking about middle voice or middle verbs or ergative verbs, but middle constructions and ergative constructions. Another concept I would like to speak about before starting with middle and ergative constructions as such is the verbal category of middle voice. While many languages display only active and passive voice contrast, like Spanish, some languages have a three-way distinction: active, passive, and middle voice, and that is the case of English. It's important to remember that in Spanish we do not speak about middle voice, but middle constructions. And in your handout, and in chapter 41, we have recommended from La RAE, point 41.71b, La RAE explains why it is that in Spanish, we do not speak about middle voice, but middle constructions. We have quoted that section and included it in your handout. You can have a look at it. It's around page 149 or 150. Okay, Unit 3. Okay, Selce-Murcia and Larsen Freeman in the grammar book explain that there exists a means in English, besides the passive voice, to put a non-agentive noun phrase, that is to say, a subject that is non-agentive, that is patient, into subject position. And that means that resource is middle voice. In English, there is no formal marker for the middle voice. The distinction is only shown by alterations in the syntax of the sentence. That is to say, in the order in the sentence and in how a transitive verb is used. Let's see. The middle voice allows the subject of a sentence to be non-agentive, even if the morphology of the verb is active. That is to say, well, we'll have a look at the examples and you'll understand. The verbs which allow the object of a transitive clause to be a subject of an intransitive one are called ergative and are said to be in middle voice. This happens in English, not in Spanish, I insist. For example, the gang shattered the glass. That is an instance of active voice. The glass was shattered by the gang. That is an instance of passive voice. We can see there's a different morphology because, for example, of the complement agent. And the complement agent and the use of the auxiliary verb to be. The glass was shattered by the gang. There's a different morphology. This is different from the gang shattered the glass. But then we have the glass shattered during the riot, right? This is an example of middle voice. Not middle construction, which we are going to see in a minute, but middle voice. The glass shattered. Subject verb. It looks like active voice, but it's called middle voice because the verb is not a purely intransitive verb, but a transitive verb used intransitively with a subject which is patient or theme. Let's have a look at another example. Anybody can read my handwriting easily. That's active voice. My handwriting can be read easily by anybody. Passive voice, different morphology. Auxiliary verb be and complement agent. especially the use of the auxiliary verb be, because I could say my handwriting can be read easily. And then we have my handwriting reads easily. Again, this is an instance of middle voice. Why? Because we have a transitive verb used intransitively. The syntactic subject has the thematic role of patient or theme, and the form, the morphology, is that of active voice. But the verb is a transitive verb used intransitively. So this is an instance of middle voice. Just by chance, it's also an instance of middle construction. But what I want you to see is that in the case of C, the glass shattered, that's middle voice, but it would be an instance of an ergative construction, something we're going to see in a minute. In the case of C2, my handwriting reads easily, it's an instance of middle voice, and it's an instance of a middle construction. In both cases, shattered and reads, ergative verbs are ergative verbs, okay? Middle constructions. Middle constructions are patient-oriented. So there is a focus on the syntactic subject patient. Middle constructions are patient-oriented constructions which imply an agent that will perform the action expressed on the patient subject, taking into account invariant or inherent properties of it. So, if I say something like, my handwriting reads easily, translated into Spanish as, mi letra se lee bien, en las dos lenguas es un caso de construcción media, what is it that I mean by patient-oriented? Well, my handwriting is the syntactic subject, patient. There is an implied agent because someone reads my handwriting. So there must be an agent that does the action, right? But I present it this way because I want to focus on the inherent properties of my handwriting. If it reads easily, it's because it's clear, it's tidy, okay? The same goes for this shirt irons easily. Of course, the shirt is not an agent. The shirt is not ironing anything. But the translation would be, esta camisa se plancha fácil o se plancha fácilmente. Fácil es el uso del adjetivo con valor adverbial en contextos informales, ¿verdad? So, this shirt irons easily. There must be something in the fabric of the shirt, the type of fabric, el tipo de tela, que hace que se planche fácil. Entonces es una construcción media. There's an implied agent because someone irons, alguien es el que plancha, alguien cualquiera, es genérico, y hay alguna propiedad inherente a ese sujeto que hace que esa sea la situación. Well, when a middle construction describes how the action which the verb expresses is carried out, it is called non-standard middle. Non-standard because in this case we are not speaking about the inherent properties of the subject, which is the usual thing, but how the action is carried out. This blouse buttons at the back. So the action of buttoning the blouse, of someone doing this, is not related to the quality or an inherent property of the blouse. It's simply how the action is done. This blouse buttons in the back. Button is a transitive verb used intransitively, an ergative verb. Esta blusa se abotona atrás, or in those days, bonnets tied under the chin. Las cofias se ataban bajo la barbilla. Como en la familia Ingalls, Caroline, she would wear a bonnet and she would tie it under the chin. Okay, ergative constructions. Ergative constructions are also patient-oriented constructions. So again, the subject, the syntactic subject, has the thematic role of patient. However, they express happenings, events, spontaneous occurrences. Unlike middle constructions, there is no agent implied, but an external cause. The ice melted in the sun. It's not like this shirt irons well. Anybody or everybody can iron this shirt, but something happened. The ice melted in the sun. Nobody did this. It happened. It's an event. Or there's a typo. There's a D missing. The windscreen shattered in the accident. It shattered, of course. It shattered because of the accident, because, I don't know, a pole or something broke it, right? But here it is presented as an event, as something that happened. We don't know how. And my nails dried fast. Well, they just dried. Apparently, this happened. This action happened by itself. So much so that one of the proofs you can apply when you're in doubt whether a construction is middle or ergative is by adding the adverbial por sí solo or by itself. My nails dried fast by themselves, or se secaron solas. That would be a case of ergative construction. Note, ergative verbs, that is to say derived intransitives, are used both in middle and ergative constructions. Ergative verbs are used in middle and ergative constructions. However, when the construction is ergative, the verb usually denotes a change of state. And this is not the case, I say however, because it's not the case in the case of middle constructions. They are ergative verbs, but they do not denote change of states. Okay, so to sum up, the main distinguishing features between middle and ergative constructions are the following. Middle constructions describe specific qualities of the subject. The shirt that irons well, or pasta cooks fast. Ergative constructions describe events, happenings. The ship sank in the storm or during the storm. Of course, it was the storm or the waves in the sea that made it sink or that sank the ship. But you can present it as an ergative construction, as an event. So in the case of middle constructions, they have a static character because they are descriptive of a quality. But ergative constructions that describe events or happenings have a dynamic character. This implies that the verb tenses used in the case of middle constructions are usually non-progressive tenses, present tenses, while ergative constructions can be expressed in any tense. There's an implied agent in the case of middle constructions. In the case of ergative constructions, there's no implied agent. There's an external cause. Middle constructions are often modified by circumstantials of manner. It reads well, easily, right? And they do not admit circumstantials of time. Why? Because they have this generic interpretation. So this shirt irons well every day, not today. I cannot say that yesterday it didn't iron well and today it irons well. No, it always irons well. Or my handwriting always reads easily, not just today. Okay? So I cannot say yesterday it didn't read easily. In the case of ergative constructions, they admit circumstantials of time. The ice melted in the sun yesterday, the ship sank during the storm 3 years ago, or whatever. Why? Because they describe specific events. Okay, I'm going to introduce a final practice which is adapted from practice 6 in your handout, page 178, I think. Okay, it's practice 6, around 165, well, it depends. What is it that you have to do? You have to read the advertisement. This is an advertisement on advertising gallo oro, el arroz gallo oro. So read the advertisement and classify the verb phrases in bold, in Spanish, of course, and then analyze their corresponding renditions in English. You have to identify, we have not highlighted them, which verb form translates which form, right? So you will have to decide if all these, whether these are instances of middle constructions, ergative constructions, or maybe passive voice or construcciones impersonales, something else. Okay? So we'll do this in class. If you cannot attend classes, you can ask questions in our forum. Thank you.